You're
We
welcome.
want to
You're
move to
welcome.
another very important issue, very much on the same wavelength here, and that is the Oakland Arms Embargo campaign. We are very happy to be joined by Voulette Mansour, who's a member of the Palestinian Youth Movement and an organizer with the Oakland Arms Embargo campaign. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me here today.
Well, it's an honor to have you here with us. And I guess maybe I'll just start with the most obvious question. What is the Oakland Arms Embargo campaign?
It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be here. I just came back from the Oakland Airport right now, where we
Mm.
had a press conference and a rally this morning, rushed back in time for this interview. But we had this press conference in front of the Oakland Airport. And one of the things that, rang through all of these speeches and all of these, powerful speakers who were talking to the importance of this campaign to unions. We just had UAW Region 6 endorse the campaign, which represents 120,000 workers across the West Coast, Alaska, and Hawaii. We've had a movement lawyer speak. We had faith leaders speak. We had organizations, over 20 organizations that are now a part of this broad coalition and growing coalition to demand that Oakland end its complicity in genocide, right? End its complicity and end these military shipments that are being shipped from our civilian airport, from civilian infrastructure to the Israeli military. Just to give you all a little bit of context, we launched as the Palestinian Youth Movement this Mask Off Mercy campaign that really tied logistics to everlasting war. I know y'all have talked a lot about the Mask Off Mercy campaign here on your show, but we looked at rail, seaports, and we started to look at airports too through that understanding of the role of logistics in the supply chain of weapons and military cargo and arms to Israel. And that's when we started looking at the creation of the F-35, right? And the F-35, that's one of the most expensive and deadliest weapons on the market. And we saw that, through our research, we were surprised and shocked that Oakland popped up on the map as not just a stopping point, as not just a blimp on this map of support and consist and flow of weapons and arms and military cargo to Israel. It was a central node. It is one of the few consistently active civilian airports that is facilitating F-35 fighter jet components to Israel. And so we released this report on the 28th that uncovered this role that Oakland Airport has. And at the same time, we launched this coalition and this campaign as a responsibility to really stop this from happening in Oakland.
It's so wild because, most people don't think of a commercial airport like the one in Oakland as being a part of the war machine. So I appreciate that you broke down a bit of how, like, of what exactly is going on. But, do you know how it became a hub for military cargo? And, what kinds of cargo are being shipped? Who's sending it? Who's approving it? Like, where's the accountability here?
Yeah, so we know through this research that in the last 6 months alone, Oakland Airport has shipped over 280 military cargo shipments to Israel, right? Over 280. And this is not just happening once or twice. This has happened almost every single week, multiple times per week this year. That's what I mean by Oakland is not just a small player. It's actually a central player and a consistent player in the supply chain to Israel and a supply chain for genocide. And I think, when we're talking about what's happening right now, and we're talking about the genocide, we're seeing right now Gaza City being besieged and invaded by the Israeli military. We're seeing this invasion play out before our eyes. We're seeing Israeli warplanes bombard Gaza constantly. And we're witnessing this wave of massacres again and again, right? And these components that are being sent from Oakland are essential for this deadly and expensive weapon on the market. It's the crown jewel of the Israeli Air Force. That's what the F-35 is. And it carries bunker buster bombs. It carries 2,000-pound bombs. And that's actually, the bomb dropper, the infrastructure, the structure that carries these 2,000-pound bombs is one of the components that's being shipped out of the Oakland Airport, right? These are the same bombs that we've seen destroy hospitals, churches, mosques, that have leveled entire refugee camps over these past 2 years. And we've seen, in El Mawasi massacre back in July, we saw these 2,000-pound bombs kill 90 Palestinians and continue these massacres over and over again. And these other components that are being shipped are the components that are used to guide weapons on the F-35, their power and surveillance and targeting systems, things and components that support critical flight operations. These components that are flying out multiple times per week and weekly from our airport is essential to the combat readiness of the Israeli Air Force that continues to bombard Gaza. So through this, we know beyond a reasonable doubt that this military cargo, these components that are being shipped out of our airport, are being used by the Israeli Air Force to commit this genocide and to carry out these airstrikes that are killing our people daily.
It's notable in a number of different ways, this campaign, but one I think is that it's happening there in Oakland in the Bay Area, which actually has a long history of these types of people's arms embargoes and hot cargoing ships around apartheid in South Africa and other things like that. I mean, insofar as that history is relevant here today, how do you feel it is so, and how are you all building on that legacy, around that specifically, and just overall Oakland as a city that has a preeminent place in the history of, I think, progressive and political activity here in the United States?
I mentioned this in the beginning, but we were shocked when we found out that Oakland plays such a central role in this genocide, because Oakland is a bastion, is a hub for social justice movements, where so many progressive movements have actually come from the Bay Area, come from Oakland, have been built from Oakland. The ceasefire resolutions and the movement for a ceasefire was actually started in the Bay Area. Oakland was one of the first cities that actually passed a ceasefire resolution back in November of 2023. I was there when Oakland unanimously passed a ceasefire resolution, and the council members and the city officials were moved by the masses of people that supported this resolution and supported the people of Palestine. The ILWU Local 10 is the only longshore workers union in the entirety of the United States that has enacted an arms embargo from the seaport of Oakland, right? And so this is now coming, and they are using and exploiting the airport under the noses of the city officials, of the people of Oakland, of the unions and workers who have already made a decision that we support Palestine, right? And so this is a nefarious, like undermining of the will that has already been in the record, has already been, solidified, that the people of Oakland stand for justice, the people of Oakland stand for Palestine, the people of Oakland stand for liberation, right? And so if there's something that's really shocking and really nefarious about the fact that this is happening across, it's happening not just in Oakland, but the role that Oakland plays is honestly, we found that it's second only to Fort Worth, Texas, in the facilitation of these F-35 fighter jet components to Israel and to Israel's Nevatim Air Base. So I think, history shows that when Oakland stands up and fights for something, it reverberates across the whole country. So this is a part of our duty. It's a part of the legacy of Oakland, the legacy of the Bay Area, and the fact that we're able to document and expose this really sets a precedent for other cities across the United States, right? It's a call for all of us to find out and to confront, especially the use of our civilian and public infrastructure for the facilitation of genocide.
So, on that note, I'm going to ask you, what would it look like to win on this particular campaign in Oakland? So, I imagine, it's going to be an uphill battle. All of these sort of different campaigns are. But all that's to say, also, you mentioned another site. You mentioned Fort Worth. I'm curious if there are other sites of U.S. complicity similar to this. And are there similar campaigns perhaps emerging in other cities?
Yeah, for sure. We just launched a petition on our website this morning at the press conference, and we have our demands listed on that petition. Also, call for everyone to go to armsembargonow.com, where you can find that petition, where you can find this information, you can find the report. But really, we're demanding from our elected leaders, our Oakland City Council, the Oakland Mayor, and the Oakland Port Authority to take a bold stance and to halt the military cargo shipments from Oakland's airport. And our three main demands are: one, to immediately cease all military cargo shipments from Oakland Airport to Israel; two, to implement an arms embargo through a permanent policy that prohibits the use of Oakland's public infrastructure and finances for military transfers to Israel; and the third is to create governmental processes of accountability and transparency to ensure that Oakland is not complicit with genocide worldwide, right? And this is in line with, like, our resources should prioritize community needs, not enable ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. Our public infrastructure should not be used to facilitate daily massacres. We shouldn't be thinking when we go to Oakland Airport, or we're dropping off a loved one, or we're going to travel somewhere, that there are lethal F-35 fighter jet components that are just in the next plane over. Like, we have a right and a responsibility to stop that from happening. So that's really what we're demanding of our elected officials, and of our city leaders. And to your question around, how this is being proliferated, when ceasefire happened, that was a movement that spread across the nation, right? That people were demanding from their city officials. They were demanding that their city and that their locale stands with Palestine and calls for a ceasefire, right? And now in this moment, we need to raise the ceiling of our demands, and we need to understand that in order for a ceasefire to be enacted, in order to uphold that spirit of those ceasefire resolutions that so many of us pass within our cities, we need to actually implement and enforce an arms embargo. And so this is actually something that every city should be taking up and can be taking up and are taking up, right? Oakland is the first city to launch a local arms embargo campaign, but it's definitely not the last. And there are many cities across the US that are taking this up, and are also seeing that the use of civilian infrastructure, something that we didn't really know about before, but now we know that the US sends 68% of the weapons to Israel, but now we know that they use our airports and our civilian infrastructure to make that happen. And as people of conscience, we have a responsibility to stop that. And so arms embargo is something that we need to proliferate. We need to raise that demand, raise the ceiling, and continue to make a stance in order to see the end to this genocide, and to make sure that Israel doesn't have the materials and the tools to continue this, like, wholesale massacre of our people.
Mm-hmm. Well, and let me just ask you, before we let you go here one more time, I mean, how can those who are in the Oakland area, San Francisco Bay Area, find out more and get involved, or others if they just want to learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, well, I mentioned this a little earlier, but I'll say it again. I'll keep saying it. Go to armsembargonow.com. You can find all the information there. You can contact us if you want to take this up in your city. You can go to the Get Involved tab and fill that out. We'll get your information and see what we can do to support. And then again, please sign the petition, especially if you're in the Bay Area in Oakland. Please sign the petition up on our website, and get plugged in, and you can stay updated on our Instagram at Oakland Arms Embargo.
Yes, well, repetition, of course, is golden in this case. Voulette Mansour with the Palestinian Youth Movement and the Oakland Arms Embargo campaign. We really, really appreciate you coming and informing us here on the Freedom Side.
Thank you so much for having me.